Loving versus Virginia, breaking the barriers of interracial marriage in the United States. The Loving versus Virginia court case demonstrates breaking the segregation barrier because prior to the court case, interracial marriage in the United States was illegal in most states and heavily frowned upon. Due to this case, opinions on interracial marriage began to change throughout the country, eventually leading to the legalization of interracial marriage in every state. Before the case, as aforementioned, interracial marriage was illegal and heavily frowned upon in the United States. In 1664, due to the heavy racism in Britain, Maryland passed an official law outlawing marriage between whites and black slaves in the colonies. In 1667, the Commonwealth of Virginia banned all interracial marriages and threatens to exile any whites who marry people of color. Be it enacted that whatsoever English or other white men or women being free shall intermarry with a Negro, mulatto, or Indian man or woman, bond or free, shall within 3 months after such marriage be banished and removed from this dominion forever. In 1705, Virginia expands their policy that implements huge fines on ministers who performs a marriage between a person of color and a white person with 10,000 pounds. In 1780, the state of Pennsylvania is the first to repeal the anti-miscegenation law, further cementing the abolishment and equal rights of colored people. In 1883, in the case of Pace versus Alabama, the Supreme Court rules that the bans don't violate the 14th Amendment. It was not until 1948 when Americans' opinions towards mixed marriages began to change. In the California State Court case of Perez v. Sharp, the state Supreme Court became the first American court, federal or state, to condemn the bans on interracial marriage. The California Supreme Court finds the state ban on interracial marriage unconstitutional. Justice Roger J. Traynor declares freedom to join in marriage with the person of one's choice. Therefore, in California, marriage became a fundamental right. As a result of Perez v. Sharp, anti-miscegenation laws began to be repealed all across the country. Finally, by 1965, only 19 states still had anti-miscegenation laws in place. On July 11, 1958, at 2 a.m. in the state of Virginia, the county sheriff entered the home of a white man, Richard Loving, and a Native American and black woman, Mildred Jeter. They were arrested for violating the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. They had the option to leave Virginia for 25 years or have 1 year in prison. So, in 1958, the two married in D.C. However, when the couple had returned, they were arrested on charges of miscegenation.
I think that marrying who you want to is a right that no man should have anything to do with. It's a God-given right, I think.
The night we were arrested, I guess it was about 2 a.m. And I saw this light, and I woke up, and it was the policeman standing beside the bed. And he told us to get up, that we was under arrest, and locked us up. And in January, they had the trial. And they told us to leave the state for 25 years. But the way I understood it, the lawyer said that we could come back to visit, when we wanted to. So that Easter, we came back, and they got us again.
We had been down a few times before that, but at Easter we came down, they found out we was down. They arrested us again.
On the subsequent trial, Judge Liam Basil ruled Almighty God created the races white, black, yellow, Malay, and red, and he placed them on separate continents. The fact that he separated the races shows that he did not intend for the races to mix. Rather than the couple going to prison, they, along with their children, were permitted to leave the state. So the Lovings moved to D.C.
I didn't realize how bad it was until we got married.
In 1963, Mildred began to miss her old home, so she wrote to U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy asking for assistance in appealing Judge Basil's ruling. Kennedy had referred the Lovings to the American Civil Liberties Union. This was a non-profit whose mission is to defend and preserve the individual rights granted from the Constitution. The attorneys Philip Hirschkopf and Bernard Cohen of the ACLU helped get the case to the Supreme Court. They argued that the Virginia laws violated the 14th Amendment.
We have 3 children and cannot afford an attorney. We wrote to the Attorney General. He suggested that we get in touch with you for advice. Please help us if you can. Hope to hear from you real soon. Yours truly, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Loving. And it was that simple letter that got us into this not-so-simple case.
We advance the argument that these statutes are slavery statutes. They're meant to keep the Negro people in the badges and bonds of slavery.
The outrageous civil effects of these statutes are not always apparent right away. For example, if Richard Loving were to die, then Mildred Loving would not be able to collect Social Security benefits as his widow.
What is fundamentally important, though, is we ask the court to decide that a state may not pass a law which proscribes marriage between 2 consenting, competent adults based on race alone.
On June 12, 1967, the conviction was overturned on the Lovings case, and all states began to become influenced that prohibiting interracial marriage was unconstitutional. Since interracial marriages have been legalized, there have been many short-term effects, such as influencing interracial couples to legalize marriage in their state. This also inspired same-sex marriage advocates to take their cases to court. As for today, there is an estimated 11 million Americans who are in interracial marriages, therefore breaking the barrier of segregation in marriage in the United States of America. The influential bravery of Loving versus Virginia led to the legalization of interracial marriage, which caused a breaking of segregation and discrimination. The conquering of the barrier forever redefined marriage in the U.S., along with being a victory of civil rights and love. Loving versus Virginia will forever be an important event in history because it broke the barrier of marriage segregation in the United States.
Loving's case affected people including Sal Tepete and Margit Tepete.
The Lovings spent 5 years in the Negro ghetto in Washington, D.C., where they suffered the indignities of unemployment, loneliness, and uncertainty. When one of the children